The Lost Girl. The sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet village of Imbola when tragedy struck. 7-year-old Annecy was jolted awake by the acrid smell of smoke and the sound of crackling flames. Her tiny home, made of mud and thatch, was engulfed in fire. In the chaos, her parents tried to reach her, but the flames proved too fierce. By the time villagers arrived to help, it was too late. Annecy, huddled beneath a broken piece of the collapsed roof, was the only survivor. Her cries echoed through the village as she clung to a small wooden door, the last thing her mother had made for her. A new home. Orphaned and scared, Annecy was taken in by her distant aunt, Yora, who lived in the neighboring village of Lufua. Aunt Yora was a tall, stern woman known for her knowledge of herbs and peculiar remedies. Many in Lufua whispered that she had otherworldly abilities, but no one dared say it aloud. When Annecy arrived, Yora's home felt cold and unwelcoming. The small hut was cluttered with jars of dried herbs, bowls of mysterious powders, and charms hanging from the ceiling. Annecy missed her parents terribly, but she had no choice. Yora was her only family now. "Come, child," Yora said briskly. "You must learn to walk if you are to stay here. We rise early and waste no time." Though her words were harsh, Yora treated Annecy with surprising care. She taught her how to grind herbs, tend the garden, and prepare remedies for the sick villagers who came seeking help. Annecy began to feel that maybe, just maybe, she could find a new kind of family here. A mysterious journey. One morning, Yora woke Annecy before dawn. "We must go to the forest," she said. "There is something you need to see." Annecy, still groggy, followed Yora into the dense woods. The journey was long and strange. They crossed a narrow river, climbed rocky hills, and wove through paths that seemed invisible to anyone but Yora. After hours of walking, they arrived at a clearing. In the center stood a gnarled, ancient tree, its twisted roots forming a natural seat. Beneath the tree sat an old woman, her silver hair glowing in the sunlight. She looked up as they approached, her dark eyes sharp and unsettling. "This is her," Yora said to the old woman. "She is ready." "Are you sure, Yora?" the woman replied in a voice that was both soft and commanding. "This is no small thing." "I am sure," Yora said firmly. The old woman nodded and held out a wooden bowl filled with a thick, black liquid. "Drink, child," she said. Annecy hesitated, looking up at her aunt. Yora's gaze was steady. "Trust me," she said. "You will understand soon." With trembling hands, Annecy took the bowl and drank. The liquid was bitter and cold, sending shivers through her small body. Almost immediately, her vision blurred, and the world spun around her. Darkness closed in. The awakening. When Annecy woke, she was back in her aunt's hut, lying on a mat. She sat up, her head pounding and her heart racing. The events in the forest felt like a dream, but something was different. As she rubbed her eyes, she noticed faint, flickering shapes around the room, shapes that weren't there before. They looked like people, but their edges were blurred, and they shimmered like mist in the sunlight. "Aunt Yora," she cried, stumbling into the main room. Yora turned from her walk, her face calm. "You see them now, don't you?" "See what?" Annecy whispered, her voice shaking. "What are they?" Yora knelt before her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "They are spirits, child. They have always been here, but now you have the sight to see them. This is a gift, Annecy. A powerful one." But why me?" Annecy asked, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to see them. They are scary." "You are special," Yora said, her voice firm but kind. "This gift will make you strong. It is part of who you are now. Trust me, in time, you will understand its purpose." A new reality. In the days that followed, Annesie's life changed forever. She could see and hear things no one else could. The spirits would sometimes whisper to her, their words unclear but filled with a strange urgency. At night, she dreamt of shadowy figures and faraway places she had never seen. Though she was terrified, she tried to trust her aunt. Yora began teaching her about the spirits, how to honor them, how to protect herself, and how to use her newfound abilities. It was a lot for a young girl to handle, but Annecy was determined to learn. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of her extraordinary journey, the training. Learning the craft. As weeks turned into months, Annecy's life revolved around her training. Her days began before sunrise, as Aunt Yora believed that the early hours were the most potent for learning magic. They would start by grinding herbs, reciting chants, and creating simple remedies for ailments. At first, it seemed like an extension of the work Annecy had already been doing, but soon, the lessons became more complex. Each plant holds a secret, Yora said one morning, holding up a dried leaf. This one can heal a fever when brewed, but crush it with this root. She held up another plant, and it will give you visions of the spirit world. Magic lies in knowing how to combine and control these elements. Annecy watched in awe as her aunt demonstrated. Yora's movements were precise, her words rhythmic and deliberate. Under her guidance, Annecy learned how to mix potions, create protective charms, and even summon small, harmless spirits for practice. At night, they sat by the fire, and Yora taught her the ancient chants of their ancestors. These chants, she explained, were the key to unlocking the deeper layers of magic. Annecy repeated the words over and over until her tongue and mind became one with their rhythm. Though the work was fascinating, it was also grueling. Yora demanded perfection, and mistakes were met with stern lectures. A single error can turn a healing potion into poison, she warned. There is no room for carelessness in this craft. Despite the pressure, Annecy's powers grew rapidly. She found herself able to sense the presence of spirits even without seeing them, and her hands seemed to instinctively know which herbs to pick for different situations. Her aunt's approval, though rare, felt like the greatest reward. Aunt's motives revealed. As Annecy's abilities flourished, she began to notice something unsettling. Yora would often mutter to herself while preparing potions, her face clouded with a mixture of worry and determination. She also kept a locked chest in the corner of the hut, one Annecy was strictly forbidden to touch. One evening, curiosity got the better of her. While Yora was away tending to a villager, Annecy crept to the chest and tried to open it. To her surprise, it was unlocked. Inside, she found an array of strange items, vials of dark, shimmering liquid, bones carved with symbols, and a journal filled with spells she had never seen before. At the bottom of the chest was a faded letter. The words were difficult to read, but one line stood out, "With Annecy's powers, we can finally." Before she could finish reading, the door slammed open. Yora stood there, her face a storm of fury and fear. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, snatching the letter from Annecy's hands. I just wanted to know." Annecy stammered. "Why are you hiding these things? What are you planning?" Yora's anger softened, but her voice was firm. "You are not ready to understand. Everything I do is for our survival, yours and mine. Trust me, child. You will know in time." Though Yora's words reassured her for the moment, Annecy couldn't shake the feeling that her aunt's intentions were more complicated than she let on. A warning ignored. As Annecy's training continued, Yora began to emphasize one lesson above all others: restraint. "Power is a gift, but it is also a burden," she said one night as they sat by the fire. "If you use it in anger, it will consume you. Never let your emotions guide your magic. Promise me, Annecy." Annecy nodded, but the warning felt distant and abstract. She couldn't imagine herself using magic for anything other than good. Yet, deep down, a seed of defiance had taken root. She was beginning to feel the weight of her own power and the temptation to test its limits. One day, while gathering herbs near the edge of the forest, she overheard two village boys mocking her. "There goes the witch girl," one sneered. "I bet she talks to ghosts." Annesie's cheeks burned with anger. She clenched her fist, the words of a spell forming on her lips. For a moment, she considered teaching them a lesson, just enough to scare them. But her aunt's voice echoed in her mind, "Never use magic in anger." With great effort, she swallowed her rage and walked away. However, the incident lingered, and for the first time, Annecy began to question whether she could always abide by her aunt's warning. Foreshadowing the storm. Yora noticed the change in Annecy. "Your powers are growing, but so is your pride," she said one evening. "You are not just learning spells, you are learning discipline. Without it, you will destroy yourself and everyone around you." Annecy wanted to argue, but she held her tongue. She didn't want to disappoint Yora, even though she felt the weight of her aunt's expectations pressing down on her. Unbeknownst to both of them, the choices Annecy would make in the near future would put Yora's warnings to the ultimate test. For now, though, the young girl continued her training, unaware that her journey was about to take a dark and irreversible turn: love and betrayal. Meeting Lumo. Years passed, and Annecy grew into a striking young woman. Her once timid nature had transformed into quiet confidence, a product of her years of training and mastery under Yora's strict guidance. Though she was isolated from much of the village, whispers of her beauty and mysterious aura reached far and wide. One fateful market day, while fetching supplies for her aunt, Annecy met Lumo, a traveling merchant. He was a tall, handsome man with an easy smile and a charm that seemed to brighten the air around him. His kindness immediately set him apart from others who avoided Annecy or stared at her with suspicion. As Lumo helped her carry her heavy basket, they struck up a conversation. He told her of his dreams to build a prosperous trade route and spoke of his adventures in other villages. Annecy, captivated by his stories, found herself laughing and opening up in a way she hadn't in years. "You're different," Lumo said, his eyes sparkling as he looked at her. "There's something special about you." Annecy blushed, brushing his words aside. But she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest. Over the weeks that followed, their paths continued to cross, and what started as casual meetings blossomed into a tender romance. For the first time in years, Annecy felt truly seen and accepted. Betrayal unfolds. Despite her happiness, Annecy wrestled with a dilemma. She had hidden her powers from Lumo, fearing his reaction. But as their bond deepened, the secret weighed on her. One evening, under the glow of the moon, she decided to tell him. They were sitting by the riverbank, their favorite spot, when she took his hands and confessed. "Lumo, there's something I need to tell you. I have abilities. I can see and speak to spirits, and I've learned magic from my aunt." For a moment, Lumo said nothing. His smile faded, and his brow furrowed. "Magic," he repeated, his voice cautious. "Yes," Annecy said, her heart pounding. "It's not something I chose, but it's part of who I am. I wanted you to know because I care about you." Lumo pulled his hands away, standing up abruptly. "Annecy, this is too much. Spirits. Magic. That's dangerous." "No, it's not like that," she protested, rising to her feet. "I've never hurt anyone. I only use my powers for good." But Lumo shook his head, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. "I don't know if I can be with someone like you. This isn't normal." He left that night, leaving Annecy standing by the river, her heart breaking as his figure disappeared into the darkness. The days that followed were agonizing. Lumo avoided her, and the warmth that had once defined their relationship was replaced by cold indifference. Annecy tried to reach out, but he was always distant, offering vague excuses and dismissing her attempts to reconcile. Then came the day that shattered her world entirely. Annecy discovered she was pregnant. With trembling hands, she went to Lumo, hoping this news might bring them back together. "Lumo, I'm carrying your child," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. Lumo's reaction was nothing like she had imagined. Instead of joy or concern, his face darkened. "That's not possible," he said coldly. "How do I know it's mine?" "You're a witch, Annecy. For all I know, this is some trick." Annecy's eyes filled with tears. "How can you say that? You know I've only ever cared for you." But Lumo was resolute. "I want nothing to do with you or this child. Leave me alone." His words were like a dagger to her heart. As he walked away, Annecy collapsed to the ground, sobbing. The man she loved had not only rejected her but had called her integrity into question. She felt betrayed and utterly alone. Heartbreak and anger. Annecy returned home to her aunt, who noticed her tear-streaked face and trembling hands. "What happened, child?" Yora asked, her voice unusually gentle. Annecy poured out the entire story, her grief spilling over like a flood. Yora listened quietly, her expression darkening with each word. When Annecy finished, Yora sighed deeply. "I warned you, Annecy. This is why you must be cautious with your heart. Not everyone can accept what you are." But Annecy was inconsolable. As the days turned into weeks, her heartbreak began to harden into something darker. The memory of Lumo's rejection and cruel words replayed in her mind like a relentless storm. "He called me a witch," she muttered one evening, pacing the hut. "He said my child wasn't his. After everything, he left me to suffer alone." "Annecy," Yara said sharply, stepping in front of her. "Listen to me. Anger is a fire that consumes. If you use your powers for revenge, it will destroy you." But Annecy wasn't listening. Her mind was already racing with ideas, fueled by pain and humiliation. She thought of the spells she had learned, the forbidden rituals Yora had told her never to touch. For the first time, she felt the pull of darkness. "I'll make him regret what he's done," Annecy whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "He'll know the pain he caused me." Yora grabbed her shoulders, her grip firm. "No, Annecy. I will not allow it. You must rise above this. Do you hear me?" Annecy nodded, but her aunt's words couldn't extinguish the flames of her anger. That night, as the village slept, Annecy stared into the fire, her thoughts consumed by revenge. Deep inside, she knew this was a dangerous path, but her heartbreak and fury were too powerful to ignore. The storm brewing within her would set the stage for a decision that would alter her destiny forever. The curse of revenge. The dark choice. The pain of Lumo's betrayal festered in Annecy like an open wound. Night after night, she tossed and turned, her mind racing with thoughts of vengeance. She remembered the forbidden spells Yora had warned her about, the rituals that required great sacrifice and carried unimaginable consequences. One fateful evening, unable to contain her anger any longer, Annecy made her decision. She sneaked into Yora's private storage and retrieved an ancient scroll. The parchment was fragile, its ink faded, but the spell it described was unmistakable, a curse so potent that it could unravel a person's entire life. The spell required a powerful catalyst, blood tied by life to the target. Annecy's unborn child, Lumo's flesh and blood, was the only connection strong enough to make the curse effective. Tears streamed down her face as she prepared the ritual. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the forest clearing where she walked. Annecy gathered the necessary herbs and symbols, her hands trembling as she arranged them. She drank a potion to end her pregnancy, enduring the searing pain that followed, and collected the blood in a clay bowl. Standing under the moonlight, she held the bowl high and began chanting the words from the scroll. The forest seemed to hold its breath as her voice grew louder, the air around her charged with a dark energy. The blood in the bowl swirled and shimmered, glowing faintly as the spell took shape. With the final words, Annecy poured the blood onto the ground, sealing the curse. A gust of wind tore through the clearing, extinguishing her candle. She fell to her knees, exhausted and shaken, but filled with grim satisfaction. Consequences begin. The curse worked swiftly. Within days, Lumos' life began to unravel. His once thriving business fell apart as his merchandise was mysteriously spoiled or stolen. His health deteriorated rapidly, leaving him weak and bedridden. Worst of all, he was plagued by terrifying visions and nightmares that kept him awake at night, his mind fraying under the strain. Word of Lumos' misfortune spread through the village, and whispers of witchcraft grew louder. Meanwhile, Annecy remained silent, watching from afar as her curse wreaked havoc on the man who had wronged her. But her satisfaction was short-lived. Yora discovered the truth when she found the remnants of the ritual in the forest. Furious, she confronted Annecy, her face a mask of anger and disappointment. "You used forbidden magic, didn't you?" Yora demanded. "You ended an innocent life and cursed a man. Do you realize what you've done?" Annecy, her voice trembling, tried to justify her actions. "He betrayed me, Aunt Yora. He called me a witch, denied his own child, and left me to suffer alone. He deserved it." Yora's expression darkened. "Deserved it? You took the life of your own child, Annecy. You let your anger blind you to the consequences of your actions. You've become the very thing I warned you about." Annecy's defiance faltered as Yora's words sank in. But it was too late for regret. Yora, unwilling to tolerate such darkness in her home, made a painful decision. "You cannot stay here," she said coldly. "Your actions have brought shame to our family and danger to this village. You must leave." With nothing but a small bag of belongings, Annecy was cast out. She wandered aimlessly, the weight of her choices pressing down on her with every step. Isolation and regret. Annecy found herself on the outskirts of the village, where she built a small hut deep in the forest. Isolated from the world, she lived a solitary existence, haunted by the memories of what she had done. At night, she was tormented by nightmares of her unborn child and the curse she had cast. She often heard phantom cries echoing through the trees, and the spirits she once commanded now seemed to mock her. The guilt was unbearable, but there was no escape. She avoided people, fearing their judgments and her own shame. Villagers who ventured near her hut told stories of a cursed woman who roamed the forest, a cautionary tale whispered to children. As the months turned into years, Annecy became a shadow of her former self. Her once bright spirit was dulled by regret, and her powerful abilities felt more like a curse than a gift. She longed for redemption but had no idea how to find it. Foreshadowing redemption. One stormy night, as Annecy sat by the dying embers of her fire, she thought she heard a voice, a faint, melodic whisper carried on the wind. It wasn't mocking or accusatory like the others. It was soothing. She stepped outside, her heart racing. The forest was alive with the sound of rain and rustling leaves, but the voice was unmistakable. It seemed to call to her, beckoning her toward something unknown. For the first time in years, Annecy felt a spark of hope. Perhaps her journey wasn't over. Perhaps there was still a way to atone for her sins and find the peace she so desperately craved. Unbeknownst to her, this mysterious voice would lead her down a path that would change her life forever. The encounter. The stranger in the forest. Annecy's isolated life dragged on, each day blending into the next. The forest became her world, a silent witness to her pain and regret. But one evening, As she wandered deeper into the woods, she felt something unusual, a presence that made her skin prickle. Under the shadow of the ancient trees, a man stepped out from the mist. He was tall and cloaked in black, his face partially hidden beneath a hood. His eyes, piercing and dark, seemed to look straight into Annecy's soul. "You are lost," he said in a deep, calm voice. Annecy froze, her heart pounding. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I am someone who understands your pain," he replied. "Your power, your isolation, your guilt, I see it all. And I can help you." Annecy instinctively stepped back, unsure whether to trust him. "Why would you help me? What do you want?" The man smiled faintly. "You are not the first to feel abandoned by the world, and you won't be the last. But your power is rare, and it shouldn't be wasted. There is a place for people like you, Annecy. A place where you will be valued and understood." Before she could respond, the man turned and began walking into the forest. "If you're ready to stop running, follow me." The coven. Against her better judgment, curiosity and desperation compelled Annecy to follow. The man led her to a clearing illuminated by the pale light of the moon. A group of figures stood in a circle, cloaked in the same dark robes, their faces hidden behind ornate masks. "This is the Shadowed Ones," the man said. "We are a family bound by magic, stronger than any blood tie. We've been watching you, Annecy, and we believe you belong with us." The figures turned to face her, their voices murmuring in unison. The sound was haunting but oddly comforting. One stepped forward, a woman whose voice was smooth and commanding. "We understand what it means to be cast out, to carry power that others fear. Here, you will find acceptance. Here, you can be free to use your magic as it was meant to be used." Annecy hesitated. The offer was tempting, but something about the group felt wrong. "What do you mean, as it was meant to be used?" she asked. The woman tilted her head. "The world is cruel, Annecy. It takes, it destroys, and it abandons. We harness our power to take back what is ours, to survive and thrive in a world that would see us perish. Join us, and you will never feel powerless again." Annecy thought of her lonely heart, her nightmares, and the heavy burden of her guilt. For so long, she had felt like a shadow of herself, a mere ghost of the person she once was. The idea of belonging, of regaining her strength, was too alluring to resist. "I'll join you," she said softly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The group encircled her, chanting words in a language she didn't recognize. The air grew thick with energy, and Annecy felt her heart race as the power coursed through her. When the ritual ended, the group bowed their heads. "Welcome, sister," the woman said. "Your new life begins now. A life of darkness." The Shadowed Ones taught Annecy spells and rituals far beyond anything her aunt had ever shown her. Their magic was powerful but steeped in darkness, often requiring sacrifices or acts of deception. Annecy, desperate to feel strong again, embraced their teachings, ignoring the gnawing guilt that lingered in the back of her mind. Her role in the coven was to bring souls. Disguising herself as a traveler, she lured lonely or unsuspecting villagers into the forest with promises of love, safety, or healing. Once they reached the coven's clearing, the Shadowed Ones would perform their dark rituals, trapping the victim spirits to fuel their magic. At first, Annecy tried to justify her actions. These were strangers, not people she loved. And wasn't she finally part of something, finally accepted? But as the weeks turned into months, the weight of her deeds began to crush her. The faces of the victims haunted her dreams, joining the nightmares of her past. One night, after bringing a kind-hearted farmer to the clearing, Annecy stayed to watch the ritual. The man's screams echoed in her ears as the coven drained his life force, his eyes wide with terror as they locked with hers. The woman who had welcomed her into the group placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is necessary," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You're helping us survive, Annecy. This is the way of the world." Annecy nodded, but her heart felt heavy. Deep down, she knew this wasn't survival, it was destruction. Yet, she felt trapped, bound to the coven by the choices she had made. The dark spiral. As her deeds grew darker, Annecy felt herself slipping further from the person she once was. The power that had once felt like liberation now felt like chains, dragging her deeper into a pit of despair. But beneath the darkness, a spark of her old self remained, a small voice that whispered of redemption, of escape, and of the possibility of a better life. That spark, though faint, refused to be extinguished, setting the stage for the next chapter in her journey. Redemption. A targeted priest. The shadowed ones had grown bolder, demanding more sacrifices to fuel their insatiable thirst for power. One day, they assigned Annecy a new target, a traveling priest named Omori. He was known for his healing abilities and the blessings he brought to the villages he visited. The coven saw him as a threat to their influence and tasked Annecy with luring him to their clearing. Disguised as a desperate villager, Annecy waited for Omori on the outskirts of a small village. When he arrived, surrounded by a group of grateful followers, she approached him, her eyes filled with faint desperation. "Father, please," she pleaded. "My brother is gravely ill, and no healer has been able to save him. They say you have the power to help. Will you come with me?" Omori's kind eyes softened as he nodded. "Lead me to him," he said. As they walked toward the forest, Annecy felt a strange unease. Omori's presence was unlike anyone she had encountered before. There was a calmness about him, a quiet strength that seemed to pierce through her carefully crafted facade. When they reached the clearing, Annecy hesitated. Her heart pounded as she gestured for him to step forward. But as Omori approached the center of the clearing, he paused and turned to her. "You don't need to do this," he said, his voice gentle but firm. Annecy froze, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you mean?" she stammered. "I see the darkness that surrounds you," Omori said, his gaze unwavering. "But I also see the pain beneath it. You are not beyond saving, Annecy." Her name on his lips sent a jolt through her. How do you know my name?" Omori stepped closer, his presence almost overwhelming. "The spirits have whispered of you, a soul trapped in shadow, yearning for the light. This path you're on will destroy you, but it's not too late to turn back." The priest power. Annecy felt her resolve crumbling. Tears welled in her eyes as she dropped to her knees. "I don't want this," she whispered. "But I can't escape. I've done terrible things." Omori knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The past cannot be changed, but the future is yours to shape. Will you let me help you?" Annecy hesitated, fear and hope warring within her. Finally, she nodded. Omori closed his eyes and began to pray, his words resonating with a power Annecy had never encountered before. The air around them seemed to shift, growing heavy with an unseen force. The members of the coven, sensing the disruption, emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted with fury. "You dare to interfere with our work," the leader hissed, raising her hands to cast a spell. Omori remained calm, his prayers growing louder. The coven's magic, which had always felt unstoppable, seemed to falter in his presence. One by one, the shadowed ones retreated, unable to withstand the light emanating from the priest. As Omori continued, Annecy felt a searing heat within her, as though a fire was burning away the darkness that had taken root in her soul. She cried out, her body trembling as the spirits she had bound over the years were released, their freedom filling the air with a strange, bittersweet energy. When the ritual ended, Annecy collapsed to the ground, her body and mind utterly spent. She looked up at Omori, her vision blurry but her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. What have you done?" she whispered. "I have cleansed you of the darkness that bound you," Omori said. Your powers are gone, but so is their burden. You are free now, Annecy. A new beginning. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Annecy felt peace. The weight of her powers, the guilt of her actions, and the darkness of her past had been lifted. Though she was stripped of the abilities that had defined her for so long, she didn't feel loss, she felt relief. Omori helped her to her feet and offered her a choice. You can continue to run, or you can choose a new path, a path of healing, forgiveness, and redemption. Annecy took a deep breath, the forest around her feeling brighter and more alive than ever before. I want to make things right, she said. I want to help people, not hurt them. Omori nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Then your journey begins now. Over the weeks that followed, Annecy accompanied Omori as he traveled from village to village. She used the knowledge of herbs and healing she had learned from her aunt to aid the sick and injured. Though she no longer possessed magic, her compassion and determination earned her the trust and gratitude of those she helped. Annecy's past still haunted her, but she faced it with courage, determined to atone for her mistakes. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild her life, no longer defined by the darkness but by the light she chose to embrace. The whispers about the cursed woman in the forest faded, replaced by tales of a healer who had overcome her demons to bring hope to others. Annecy's name became a symbol of redemption, proof that even the darkest paths can lead to the light, the fulfilled life. Rebuilding her life. After parting ways with Omori, Annecy felt ready to face her past. She returned to her childhood village, the place where her life had been irreparably changed. As she walked through the familiar paths, memories of her parents, her aunts, and her mistakes weighed heavily on her heart. Yet, there was also a strange comfort in being home, a sense that this was where she could begin anew. The villagers were wary at first, many of them still remembering the rumors of her dark past. Some whispered behind her back, while others openly avoided her. But Annecy didn't let their fear deter her. She set up a small hut at the edge of the village and began offering her knowledge of herbs and remedies to anyone in need. Her work spoke for itself. Slowly, people began to seek her out for healing and advice. Mothers brought their sick children, farmers sought cures for their ailments, and even the elderly came to her for comfort. Annecy treated each person with kindness and humility, her heart filled with gratitude for the chance to help. Without magic, her work was harder, but it felt more meaningful. Every cure, every smile of relief reminded her that she could make a difference. The villagers, once skeptical, began to see her in a new light, not as the cursed girl of old, but as a healer and a friend. Spreading wisdom. In addition to healing, Annecy became a storyteller. Sitting by the fire in the evenings, she would share tales with the villagers, especially the children. Her stories were often drawn from her own life, though she disguised the details. One story, told often, was of a young girl consumed by anger and vengeance, who lost everything because of her choices. Anger, Annecy would say, is like a fire. It can destroy everything in its path, even the one who carries it. Forgiveness, however, is like rain, it quenches the fire and brings new life. The children listened with wide eyes, captivated by her words. Adults, too, found themselves reflecting on her lessons, often staying long after the stories ended to seek her wisdom. Annecy didn't shy away from her own mistakes. She spoke openly about the dangers of pride, the weight of guilt, and the strength it took to choose a better path. Her honesty inspired others, and her words became a source of comfort and guidance for the entire village. Legacy of Light. As the years passed, Annecy's life transformed into one of peace and purpose. She built a thriving garden of herbs and plants, teaching others how to use them for healing. She trained apprentices, passing on her knowledge to ensure that the village would always have someone to care for its people. Though she never married or had children of her own, Annecy became a beloved figure in the village, a motherly presence to all. Children would run to her for stories, elders sought her counsel, and visitors from other villages came to see the renowned healer. Her past was not forgotten, but it was no longer a source of shame. Instead, it became a testament to her resilience and the power of redemption. People spoke of her journey as a reminder that no one is beyond saving and that even the darkest paths can lead to light. Annecy spent her final years surrounded by the people she had come to love, her heart full of gratitude for the second chance she had been given. When she passed away, the village mourned deeply, but her legacy lived on. The stories she had told, the lessons she had shared, and the lives she had touched became a part of the village's history. Epilogue: The Healer's Legacy. Years later, a young girl sat by the fire, listening to an elder tell the story of Annecy, the healer who overcame her demons to bring hope to her people. The girl's eyes sparkled with wonder as the elder finished the tale. And so, the elder said, Annecy taught us that no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Remember her story, and let it guide you when you face your own challenges. The girl nodded, her heart filled with inspiration. Somewhere, in the quiet of the forest, the wind carried a soft whisper, as if Annecy's spirit was still watching over the village, her legacy of light shining on.